That was terrible for me because obviously the days were so long and I had to commute as well,
Mhm.
which was like 6 hours round trip. So I was finishing up at the event, getting on the train, sleeping on the train, getting home, showering, sleeping for maybe like 1 or 2 hours, and then getting up, getting on the train, sleeping, and going in. And that went on for like, I think 2 days of rehearsal. And I said to, I think it was Brad at the time. I think he was leading it. I was like, "Hey man, I'm like coming in from Newcastle. Is there like any spare rooms available?" And he's like, "What is wrong with you?"
Roots, who is an interesting figure within the esports community. You're an elusive figure, someone that's rarely seen on camera. So this is quite a special moment, I think, for me, and maybe even for you as well. But for those that don't know you, you are a esports, I guess, observer and producer. Maybe you can sort of introduce yourself better than I can, but this is the way that I see you, right? You're someone that works a lot on the production side of things now. You're obviously the co-owner of Longshot, I should say, and a former StarCraft 2 pro player. I don't know if would you go so far as to say it was pro back then?
No, definitely not. I would say I was semi-pro at the time. I was on a team and everything, but never really was good enough to, make a career out of it. I was more one of the early people that got into it, so I had transferable skills from playing a lot of StarCraft
Right.
Brood War. And so yeah, I was first in and got to the top of a couple of ladders and won a few tournaments, but never anything, globally substantial.
Right. All right. Well, we'll talk all about that, of course, as we do go through your timeline. But we want to start things off right where it begins, and obviously where it begins for you was quite a long time ago. 1996 was the date you gave me. Pokemon Red and Blue. So tell me about your first experiences, sort of getting into gaming. Was this just like mum or dad kind of giving you a Game Boy or something like that, or how did that sort of come about?
Yeah, it was actually so Pokemon Red and Blue was the first game that I, really got into and just became addicted. But I think my first introduction to gaming was actually watching my brother play Mortal Kombat on the Game Boy. I wasn't allowed to play it myself because I wasn't old enough,
Right.
but I was able to, sneak in and watch him play it. And as you probably know, the size of a Game Boy screen is
Hmm.
absolutely tiny, so it doesn't make for the best viewing experience. But for me, it was all very novel and exciting. And eventually, I got my hands on my own Game Boy, got Pokemon Red as my first game, and I couldn't put it down. I just got absolutely addicted immediately to gaming, and then I got Pokemon Blue, and I was had 2 Game Boys, and I was trading to myself to
Oh,
get,
right.
like,
You were one of
how
those
you had to
kids.
get the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
evolutions? Yeah, you have to trade using the Game Link. Yeah, so that was me. And yeah, ended up, getting all 150 Pokemon. I think there's a Mew in there that's 151, but I never got that.
Right.
I've seen other
I,
people get it.
I don't know if
I
I
thought it
can't
was a
remember.
myth.
Yeah,
Was
I
it
thought it was
real?
it's a glitch or a myth, or you had to do something really weird, but then you could get it. I don't even know. Like to this day, I'm still not sure. I'm sure it's obviously been debunked or proven correct at this point, but I don't care enough to go looking for it. But tell me the story about how you sold this cartridge because like I guess
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
valuable, right? In 2018 at that point.
Yeah, yeah. So I was, going through, all of my stuff from when I was a kid because I had to clean out some stuff, um, as I was moving around a bit. And I came across my old, Pokemon cards, my old Yu-Gi-Oh cards, Tarzos, if you remember
Yep.
those. Um, and all my Game Boy games, Super Nintendo games, all that sort of stuff. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna leave them in a box. I might as well sell them.
Hmm.
And so, of course, I sold all my Pokemon cards. I shouldn't have because now they just continue to go up in price. I didn't have like a Charizard or anything like that, so it's nothing too drastic. But yeah, I found my old Pokemon Blue and I turned it on and it worked. And it still had 150 Pokemon completed in the Pokedex. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna make some money off this now. Otherwise, it's just gonna sit here. Put it up on eBay, and someone messaged to buy it for um, 8 grand. And so I was like,
That's
yeah.
unbelievable to me. Like,
I was like, yeah.
surely at this point now, there's like some kind of like farm where you can just go and buy like empty blue cartridges and just play the game and catch all 150 Pokemon and sell it for $8,000. Like,
I
someone's got to be
suppose
monetizing that. But is there just not that many like Pokemon Blue cartridges around anymore? I guess.
I don't know. Maybe it was because it was authentic.
Right.
Um, I'm not sure why it was worth so much, but someone just was immediately interested, and I sort of had to tell them as well. Like, I was like 8 or 9 when I did this. There's gonna be some like
Some weird
terrible names
names
and
or
some
something.
of the
Yeah,
Pokemon.
yeah,
Yeah, like bum sniff and stuff like that. Just like really juvenile names.
yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Yeah, and
good
I
stuff.
was like, yeah, you turn it on, it's gonna be pretty bad if you're
Gonna
conservative.
be
But
cringe.
they didn't seem to care.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be cringe. Yeah.
I mean, I think I had a similar experience recently. Mum was trying to sell some of my stuff, and I think I had like a Wario game for the Game Boy, some sort of Wario. I think it was like Wario 3 or something like that.
Wario World or something like
Something like
that.
that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's going to be worth absolutely nothing. Just put it up for like 20 bucks. And it sold for like 300, 400 bucks or something like that. I was like, who's buying this for that much? Anyway, there's a market there apparently. But look, I don't want to spend too much time on like your super old history because I think that's not what people are really here to watch. But one other thing that's maybe important in terms of the context of who you are is how, competitive you were as a player or how good you were at video games. Because knowing you obviously, as we've said, went on to sort of compete in StarCraft and that kind of thing. So I want to bring up this story about you having these experiences playing some shooters against your friends. You sort of mentioned Perfect Dark and GoldenEye and how you were kind of that freak in the friend group that would sort of win all the console games. So what was that kind of like? And because I didn't really ever have that experience, right? I was good at games, but I was sort of always on the same level as my friends. So were you just like a little bit more hardcore than your friends, or did they not really play games, or were you genuinely just basically that much better?
I don't. It's hard to say. I think it's because I just spent so much time playing games when I was younger, and all the popular games I played to death. All the GoldenEyes, the shooters, Mario Kart, Mario Parties. Even I would play Mario Party by myself, like
Why?
against AIs, and just because it's fun. Like Mario Party's a fun game. It's
Sure.
obviously more fun with other people, but I didn't know that at the time. But yeah, I would just play games by myself, play Mario Kart, do time trials against myself, try and
I
try
did
and
do that.
get better
Yeah.
times. And back then it wasn't so easy to find information on the internet either about what was
Mm.
good and what worked best. And so I just sort of spent time figuring it out myself. And then obviously when you go to your friend's place and you'll sit on the Nintendo together and play a game like Super Smash Brothers, for example, you know, th- they're happy to just mash the buttons and throw you
Right.
around with a bat and stuff. Whereas
Yeah.
I'm, you know,
Trying to win.
being a absolute freak. Yeah,
Being a
trying to
sweat.
win.
You're
I was trying to win
basically
everything.
you're a sweat. That's what you were.
I was a sweat. I was an early adopter of the sweat mentality.
Yeah,
Yeah, big
before it
time.
existed as a mentality.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump forward then. Obviously, 1996 to 2007. Basically, we've covered a lot of time already, but it starts to get a little bit more interesting here because this is where you get your first PC. Obviously, you start playing StarCraft, and Wolfenstein: Enemy Territory was another game that you sort of mentioned. But there's this story about how you capped your data allowance, or you went over the data allowance. So back in the day, right, for any Zoomers, there was no unlimited, or maybe there was, but they were exceedingly expensive. There was the no unlimited sort of data plans for your home internet. So you could get like, what was it, like 100 gigabytes or 200 gigabytes, or was it
Yeah.
even that high for you back then?
I had like 600 megabytes, which is like like half a YouTube video these days.
No, but I mean, what
Um,
was your allowance? Was it what 300
oh,
megabytes?
my allowance was 600 megabytes
That's insane. That's
a month.
unbelievable. Because like when I started, I think we had 12 gigabytes the first time. That was on dial-up, something like that. Which obviously you probably couldn't even download 12 gigabytes of stuff in a month on dial-up. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So you basically went over that data allowance, which I can kind of understand, or I can kind of believe if it's only 600 meg.
Yeah. So I wasn't like streaming YouTube or anything like that because the internet was so bad, right? It would take
Mm.
ages to load a page even, so it just wasn't worth it. So I used all my data on MSN, StarCraft, Brood War, and Wolfenstein, and playing 6 hours a day of multiplayer StarCraft on a 400 megabyte plan didn't go well,
Mm.
and I ended up exceeding the data limit by gigabytes, like
Wow.
a huge amount. And you're paying an absurd amount of money for every megabyte you're over the limit. Um, and so what I did to avoid being reprimanded by my parents, I went to the letterbox, I took the bill out of the letterbox and paid it myself and hid it. So I was like, no one needs to
How
know
much
about
was
this.
it?
This won't happen again. It ended up being like $700 or something like that.
Far out.
So I was like using all my McDonald's money. Like I
Yeah,
was working at
how old were
McDonald's
you at the
every day.
time?
16.
Right. So this was probably like, I don't know how much you're working,
Uh,
but I didn't actually start working until I was like 18. But I remember earning like maybe a couple of $100 a week. So this is like almost what, a couple of weeks' wages probably.
oh yeah, I was on like $6.50 an hour at McDonald's back then. Like it's
Far
just,
out.
like you'd work a shift and you'd be like, yeah, now I can buy phone credit for my phone. Like
Yeah.
$30.
Like
Hell yeah.
I can download Crazy Frog ringtone. Hell yeah, let's go.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, so I went a long way over the data limit and it cost a lot of money. And of course, like parents found out.
Mm.
They were like, "Where's the bill? Like, have you seen it?" And it kind of just disappeared for a little while, and I thought I'd gotten away with it. But then we did a clean out of my room, and it was actually stashed under my Nintendo 64 cabinet. And so when we moved that, it was just there
Pretty
for all to
obvious.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what is this? It's like it's fine, I paid it, it's all good. And they're like, no, it doesn't work like that.
I mean, I feel like it kind of does. Like it's almost the right thing
It
to do, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah, it is. Well, in my mind, I took care of the problem myself,
Yeah,
and no one
exactly.
got hurt. But at the same time, it's like you can't just
Sweep it under
hide
the
things
rug.
like that and not tell it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But you did the
So,
right thing in the end.
okay, I'll go with that.
I'll
Thank
give
you.
you some
Easing
credit.
my conscience after all
Yeah.
these years.
Nice
Yes.
guy. All right, let's talk about getting into esports then, because obviously this early stage of your career is just playing the games for fun, whatever. But inevitably, as you've mentioned, you go on to sort of start playing Starcraft at a competitive level. But how did you sort of start first kind of discovering esports was a thing, right? You were watching things like Justin TV and Own TV and stuff like that, and finding these sort of communities. So how do you sort of actually find your way into those communities back then? Because I'm quite sure it's different to what it is now.
Yeah. So I think when I first started getting competitive about StarCraft, I was already. I don't know how I found it. I think there was like a video that my friend showed me, and it had like the top 10 plays of StarCraft for like that year. It's a
Hmm.
series called Pimpest Plays. I don't know if you've heard of it,
I've
but
not heard of it. I'm not a
it's
StarCraft guy,
so
so
it's so old school. Like the editing, the music, and everything. It's like an early montages of an RTS. Um, and so I loved that, and I started consuming like the old StarCraft Pro League.
mhm,
So the MSL, OSL, all the stuff that was being played in Korea. And my favorite player was Jadong. He was a Zerg player, just like me,
I've heard
and
that name.
he was the best player for a long time. Um, and I just started downloading his demos from just random websites and looking at his gameplay and thinking, like, how can I do that? How can I get better? And I would just sort of mimic it as best I could. Obviously, not to his level, but and then it wasn't really until StarCraft 2 came out where I had a few friends from StarCraft 1 that I'd met. I'm not sure. I think when you log in, that's right. When you log into BattleNet, you log into like a channel called Oz One. It's like channel Oz One,
Mm.
and all the Australian players were in there. There weren't many, and so everybody just sort of got to know each other. It's like it was almost like an IRC chat in a way. And so I met a bunch of people through that, and then when StarCraft 2 came out, we all sort of migrated together and started playing a lot. And we made a clan called Terra Australis, um, which ended up being sort of I suppose, the biggest StarCraft 2 clan in Australia. Um, and we had like a lot of really good players as well. And so on game release, everybody was just pumping games out, trying to like figure out the game as fast as possible. We were playing hundreds of games a day. Like
Mm.
it's literally all day playing StarCraft for months, trying to figure out this game, trying to get better. Um, and yeah, we just sort of forged a community from there. Forums started popping up about tournaments and that sort of thing. So like, yeah, we'd all sign up to the same StarCraft forums, and you'd meet other people who wanted to play, and then tournaments started rolling
Yeah.
in, and then
Yeah.
it all sorts starts
So
to evolve from there.
I've just because you've mentioned it there, I did a little bit of digging, and I just want to point out when you said Terra Australis, I thought like Terra Terra Australis,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
I guess that's the play, but for people that are watching, it's actually Terror, like Terra OR
Like scared.
Australis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've also found a page on Liquipedia for Terror Australis, and I see Tim Roots is known as Cosmic back in the day. So that's a bit of a throwback too. I didn't even know
Yeah.
you had that as a name.
Yeah, yeah. So that was like one of my first IDs. I think. Well, actually, I don't even know where I came up with the name
It's a
or
cool
why.
name.
It was just like it was just a handle. It's
Yeah.
just a handle that came up,
I can
and then
remember my first like this is the perfect like I don't know what like were you a 90s kid or were you an 80s kid, doesn't really matter.
90s.
90s. Perfect 90s kid mentality is like you go to make your first online ID, right? And you're kind of in that era where like maybe everything is available because no one's kind of gone on the internet yet. You're like part of the what first or maybe second generation of people on the internet. You're like, I'm just going to choose a cool name. So you went with Cosmic, right? That's just a cool word. Sounds really cool. For me, I remember doing the exact same thing when I went to Laser Force, which for anyone that doesn't know who's not from Brisbane, I don't know if that was a Brisbane brand. It's basically laser tag. It was the laser tag business in Brisbane or whatever. And my name was Phoenix because I was a cool kid too, but I spelled it wrong, so it was actually
Oh no.
phonics. But anyway, that's a bit of an aside. So I just think that's the perfect like little mentality or analogy for what it was like back then, choosing your gamer alias. But I want to move things on to you joining Team Frey and Carnage and kind of competing in StarCraft 2 properly. Now, those are some really OG names. I think Carnage, they were around a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if they're still operating. Frey has been gone for a long time. This would have been known as Frenetic Array, right? That's the same team that
Mm,
I'm thinking of.
yeah.
Yeah, so they were a really big org back in the day. Like you talk like I guess Team NV, Team Immunity, Frenetic Array, like these were all the big Australian orgs back then. SYF was back around then too, I think.
Yeah.
But talk to me about going to like all these lands. What lands did you actually go to, and sort of what were the results like? Were you sort of decent, or were you not up there with the top tier pros? How did that all sort of play out?
Yeah, so to start with, I was definitely an onliner. Like I was
Right.
really good online, but when I got in person, like I wouldn't play as well. I was out of my comfort zone. I was just one of those players that was really good online, but got to LAN and just didn't play as well as I do
Mm.
online. Um, Choked a couple of times on stage, which was not very cash money. That was like really embarrassing for me actually, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So not being able to like put my best foot forward on stage and play some pretty poor games kind of sucked because back then like playing on stage in front of even a crowd was quite an experience that you didn't really get to often.
Yeah.
And so to throw that in the bin was no fun.
Was
But
the mentality in StarCraft the same as it is in CS? Because in CS obviously it's quite if you can't perform on land, like you don't, no one really counts online results. Was that a thing back then too for StarCraft?
um, I don't I don't think so, not so much because there were so many online tournaments and there was such a lack of LAN opportunities even
Hmm.
um, that you just took whatever results you could get.
Yeah.
Um, and for the most part, the strong players online were strong on LAN as well. This is back like in the Moonglade era. You
Hmm.
probably know Moonglade. He
Yep.
would just he went international and he would come to these LAN events and just smoke everybody. You'd have some of the Korean ex pros that would be here at university, and
Right.
they would turn up to some lands and smoke everybody. Like it wasn't even close. But as far as the lands that I was attending, this is back when ESL Australia was formerly ACL
Hmm.
or Australian Cyber League, ACL Pro,
Yep.
which was run by Nick and JB, I believe.
Yep.
JB Hewitt, who are also the leads of ESL Australia now. Um,
Actually, APJ
does it?
Asia Pacific. They're the leads of Asia Pacific now.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, these guys were rolling around and setting up lands for us back in 2013,
Hmm.
2012. Um, just bumping in everything themselves, filling out these huge sort of spaces with Halo. They had Halo, Call of Duty, StarCraft, League of Legends at some point as well. So these were like big LAN events when they came around, and they would usually have one a year in each major city. So like Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, and Gold Coast. I don't think they ever did anything in Adelaide or Perth. I think probably just because it was so hard to get stuff there.
Yeah. Too far away.
Um, yeah. So, um, I mean, these guys are still around today, obviously helping direct ESL Australia, but they definitely cut their teeth on like the local land scene.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people don't really know that the guys that are sort of at the top now are actually on the ground running things for everybody
Yeah.
right at the start and building an esports scene back when there was none really. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, I think that the cool thing about that for them is that they were able to kind of grow with the industry. Like when it was in its infancy, they were still obviously very fresh, just running these lands and kind of learning how to do it all. And by the time it got legitimized and a lot more money started to flow in, they had also kind of built up their business acumen and skills and such like that. So it's quite a nice natural transition for them. But as far as you're concerned, did you ever get paid, or was there ever any compensation from these orgs? Like, did you get a mouse pad or something when you were competing
nah,
for them?
nah. It was just compete under their banner. It looks cool.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So yeah, I actually missed that in my last answer. So Frey became Carnage, I think, um,
Right.
because I was originally playing as a sub under Frey, and then ended up getting like like a. It wasn't even a contract. It was like a Skype message saying like, "Hey, do you want to like play for us now?" Yeah,
Mm,
sounds cool. So I got a jersey, which was cool. Got to wear a jersey to lands. Um, but that was about it as much as support goes. But yeah,
yeah.
like you said, the other teams like Team Immunity had had StarCraft players, NV, SIF, or SYF. Those guys
XL5
were
back
around
then,
back
maybe
then.
as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Pig,
Mm,
Pig,
yep.
StarCraft caster Jared. He was playing for XL5 for a long time. Um, he was yeah, he was a very good player back in the day as well.
Mm,
Won a lot of tournaments. Was pretty much the only player that could compete with Moonglade.
right.
He had a very good Zerg versus Zerg matchup, so he was able to compete with Moonglade. Whereas Moonglade would just dominate everyone else for all the other matchups.
All right, well, tell me about this time that you choked a 2-0 lead at ACL Sydney, because you mentioned this as like one of the worst points of your career. So obviously I have to ask what the circumstances around that are.
Yeah, so it was an ACL Sydney, and I think it was in like some exhibition hall, just out of Sydney in Redfern. It was like a train exhibition hall or something. I don't know.
ATP, like Technology Park, this would have been.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what it was. Yeah. Um, so we had sort of like a big ground floor space where we did, just all our group play and matches and stuff. And there was a side stage where just people would get like selected to play on stage. And so I got picked to go on, and I was so nervous because I was playing on stage. I had all my friends who I trained with coming in to watch as well. And I managed to get out to a 2-0 lead against, I can't remember what his name was. He was a Protoss player. Um, in the third game, he did some wild cheese strat where he just, you know, he poked and prodded around, made a whole shitload of flying units, and then just like flew them all in out of nowhere. And I was completely caught off guard, and it just tilted tilted me so hard because I'd won two straightforward standard games like convincingly, and then third game comes around and I just get absolutely floored by this out of pocket strategy.
Hmm.
Fourth game, so I'm rattled. I'm rattled. Fourth game, he does the same thing, and I don't prepare for it. I'm like, he won't do it again, and he beat me again. It was now 2-2, and I'm like, shit, I'm gonna throw away like a 2-0
Hmm.
lead on stage in front of everybody. It's gonna be awful, and I got it in my own head. Third game, think, okay, I'm gonna prepare for this now. So I start building like some anti-air defense in my base, a couple of units that can shoot air, little bits and pieces, and he flies in and does it again and beats me again, even though I'd prepared for it. He just had too much. I like underprepared my
Yeah.
preparation,
You kind of mind gamed
and
yourself, right? You're like, he's not going to
I
do it a
did.
third time. So I'll sort of hedge my bets a little bit, but not go all in.
Oh, yeah. So
Professional esports broadcaster, by the way, guys.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he just did the same strat three times and beat
Yep.
me three times,
Right.
and it was just so crushing because I thought I was going to win. I really felt like I was the better player, and he was the better player during that series and beat me. So full credit to him. But
But you
yeah,
can't
crushed
remember his
myself.
name, so who's really winning?
Yeah, yeah. What's he? Where's he now?
Yeah, where is he
Um,
now? Probably not on an in retrospect episode, I think.
yeah, exactly. I've reached the peak now. What's
Yeah,
he doing?
I bet you have. All right.
But yeah,
Did
that was
that
terrible. That was a
did that
terrible experience.
sort of end your career or anything like that? Was that like in the middle or toward the end, or like obviously you didn't play too much more after that, right?
No, so that was like there was a few more events that happened after that that were really enjoyable.
Hmm.
That I still competed in. But it got to a point where I was playing for Frey still, and I started to burn out from playing so much. Like I was just playing Starcraft all the time. It was pretty much the only game that I was playing
Yep.
because it was the only game my PC could run. Really, still, I hadn't upgraded my PC for a long time, and it was pretty much all I could use it for. And yeah, I just burnt out and discovered League of Legends,
Big
and
mistake.
suddenly that became yeah, big mistake, big mistake. So that suddenly became the game that I would play when I didn't feel like playing Starcraft.
Hmm.
It's new. I haven't played like a MOBA before. It's this new genre sort of thing. And I started playing more League of Legends than I was playing StarCraft. And I stopped practicing and just got dropped from the team
Yep.
because I wasn't signing up for any tournaments. I wasn't competing. I was playing on the ladder and stuff, but it was nothing like wasn't doing what I should have done. And ended up playing like a truckload of League of Legends for maybe a year and a half.
Hmm.
Wasn't any good, but it was just a fun escape for me. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I actually kind of have a very similar story with my playing career. Right, I was playing TF2, and then League of Legends came out, or I started playing League of Legends, and then bye bye esports gaming career, and I became a caster. So, similar sort of thing maybe happened to you. But one thing that I did still want to touch on from back in that time period, which you mentioned being quite impactful for you, was WCS 2012. This was where Tasteless and
Mm.
Artosis came to cast in Australia. Now, I think this was another one of the events that ACL ran, like really, really way back in the day. But what was this like having those guys here? Because I guess for someone that was into StarCraft, it must have been massive.
I think it's probably still the biggest thing that StarCraft's ever had, or that Australia's ever had in terms of StarCraft.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, StarCraft globally as an esport now isn't very. It's not very popular.
Yep.
Not like it once was. I mean, it's an old game now, really. But yeah, at the time, it was massive. It was massive to have like the premier casters from StarCraft. Everybody who played StarCraft knew who Tasteless and Artosis was.
Mate, everyone who
Um,
doesn't play StarCraft knows who they are pretty
yeah,
much at this point.
yeah. Now, like, I mean, even 10 years later, they're still casting
Hmm.
StarCraft, and they're still the best. Um, in my opinion, they're probably one of you know top. I'll even say top two because I don't know who would actually be better in my opinion, but they're probably like the best casting duo that that I know of. They just have an insane flow together. They know when to talk about the game, when to talk rubbish. I suppose they've been doing it for a long time, but yeah. So when we found out that they were coming to Australia to do the WCS comp, everybody bought tickets straight away. Everybody signed up for qualifiers. I signed up for qualifiers, and I barely played anymore. Um, and so I think that's probably the most people I've seen watching a StarCraft match as well.
Hmm.
Everybody filled out the seats. There were people standing off to the sides. Um, but yeah, having Tasteless and Artosis come down was an incredible experience, really. And we all went out afterwards as well. Just floated around Sydney. I remember Tasteless actually got kicked out of a bar because he just started smoking inside.
Oh,
Like
didn't know the
he
Aussie
didn't
law.
know. Yeah, he didn't know. He just like lit up a smoke inside, and everybody got kicked out. No, actually, sorry, no, he got asked to leave, and so everybody else just left. And the owner came out and was like, "Why is everyone leaving? Like, what's going on?"
Uh-huh.
And
He didn't know.
he just let us back. He let us all back in.
Right.
Like,
Because he didn't want to lose all that
'cause
business.
yeah, exactly. There was probably like 50, 60 of us just turned up at 11:30 p.m. to this one random bar,
Right.
and suddenly everybody leaves at the same time. Yeah, we all got left in and
Hey, he's an
let
influencer.
back in.
That's influence. Right there.
Yeah, yeah, he was an influencer, I suppose.
Yep.
Now that I think about it,
Yep.
but
Before the word existed.
yeah, I actually think there was like these little StarCraft 2 race icons on the front of the booths, um, where the players were playing on stage, and I think they now live in the ESL office.
Yeah, they
They're
do.
like the
I've
big
seen them. Yep.
icon slabs, and they've been signed and stuff.
Yep. All
I remember
signed.
when I would go in there, I'd see them all, and I'd be like, "It's there."
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, I don't think many people in esports in this day and age can actually say that they were at an esports event in 2012. Like even for me, I didn't really start getting into esports until 2013, sort of thing. So yeah, you do go way back. But let's jump forward a little bit, because I think between 2013 and 2016, maybe there's not so much going on for you. You know, you were playing a bit of CS on the side, and you were studying. So there's not too much to
Yeah.
really talk about there. But we get to 2016, and this is kind of the point where your esports career actually starts to take off a little bit, right? You get this call up from your friend to do some observing for Overwatch at ESL. So I have a lot of
Yep.
questions here. Like, who even was this friend? Is this a friend that will remain unnamed, or?
No, so it was I don't know if you remember Callum.
Hmm,
He was like an admin, Zenorek, I think
maybe,
his ID
yeah, I
was.
think I do. Yeah, vaguely remember.
Yeah, so he messaged my friend. So I wasn't like friends with Callum. He messaged my friend, who
Right.
then messaged me and said, "Hey, do you want to like come and try observing Overwatch?" 'Cause this is like when Overwatch had just come out.
Hmm.
And I'd done like a bit of Starcraft observing back in the day as well. And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot." And yeah, it all came through fine. And I went to the studio in Sydney. And so this is like I was in Newcastle, so this is like a 3-hour train ride
Hmm.
for me to get to the studio. And the day rate was pretty shit, which is fair enough. Like I had never done it before. No one knew who I was. So I just like walked in and I think it was I can't remember who was casting it. I think it was Miles.
Might have been
Miles and Ross.
Miles and Rogi. I think they did a couple of the early ones.
Yeah, yeah. It was Miles and someone else. But yeah, everyone was really nice, super friendly, sat me down, and I just kind of minded my own business and did my best to observe.
Hmm.
Um and I got asked to come back the next week, and I was like, yeah, I'll come back
Yeah,
next week.
can't wait to do another 6 hour round trip for $100.
Yeah, yeah. Well, for me, it was like so novel and exciting. By this time, I'd finished my study and I was just working like a regular job,
Right.
working like a Monday to Friday, at the university, doing application development, pretty much, um, and system analysis. So I was just doing that. It was very dry, but I enjoyed it. But yeah, having this like little escape on the weekend to go like do esports again was really nice, and I didn't mind the long trip on the Saturday at
Yeah.
all.
It's funny. It's funny
And
how
then
our expectations change the deeper into the career we get.
yes, yes, we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Who were you working with? Like, was this when you met MC? Because I know obviously you guys forged this sort of like Overwatch duo, and in fact, you guys were actually observing together in a lot of different titles, which we'll probably go through. But who did you end up sort of working with on this event? What event was it actually? I think it was like would have been maybe like an ANZ Champs Overwatch, something like that.
Yeah, maybe something like that. I don't think I was actually working with anybody um, for a while. There was just a few weeks where it was just me by myself,
Hmm.
um, just swapping POVs. There was no like
Third
free
cams
cam
or
or
something.
anything like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, so I'm not sure when Contenders got announced.
Contenders was a little
No,
while
Contenders
actually.
was after.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the next step was when Overwatch World Cup came to
Correct.
Sydney,
Yeah.
and I think that's where I met MC for the first time. Um, and that's where we worked together for the first time, where we had a couple of American guys come through who were, I don't know, leading it. I guess they were contracted to run like Overwatch World Cup
Mhm.
for Blizzard, and they were
Yeah.
they were going around to all the major cities on the map and running it there.
Right. Well,
Um,
maybe we should get into that anyway, since that's a pretty reasonable transition there. Now, I think I probably should set a bit of the context as to what Overwatch World Cup was, because this was absolutely going to be the biggest event that you worked on up to that point. And for most people, even in Australia, who got to work on this event, it was one of, if not the biggest events that they had seen to that point. I think we had IEM Sydney just prior or just after. I can't remember exactly what the timeline was, but there was an
I think
IEM
it
in
was up. Yeah.
2017. But either way, there was this massive Overwatch event. It was in the Star Casino in Sydney. You had all the international talent. You had international players. You had, as you mentioned, Kai's coming over from the broadcast side as well. You obviously worked with Jason Baker, otherwise known as Alchemister, who did go on to work at Overwatch League and Do Not Peak Entertainment now, I think is where he's at. But this,
Did
to
A League
me,
as well.
it sort of felt like this was going to be a like a not a practice necessarily, but it felt you got the sense that this was like leading into Overwatch League. Like there was a lot of stuff that was kind of like getting fitted into place,
Mm.
like how this broadcast is going to work, who's going to be the talent, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. And this was like a test run almost for Overwatch League, which I think dropped in 2018. Contenders did drop in 2018, so presumably Overwatch League did then as well. So let's talk about Overwatch World Cup. For you, obviously, you've been working with ESL for a little bit now, up to that point. Getting the call up for Overwatch World Cup, did you kind of understand what you were getting into? Were you like really hyped up about this? Were you like, this is finally something cool? Or did you really not know what you were going into at that point?
Yeah, I had no idea what I was getting into. Not in a bad way, but I'd never worked a full scale event like that
Hmm.
where there was a bump in, there was rehearsals, there was you know, run sheets and you know, hotel allocations, flight allocations, like all the logistics behind running a big event sort of got put in front of me. Um, and so it was like a really eye-opening experience of all the work that goes into an event and a broadcast. Um, not even just from what the viewers see, but all the behind the scenes stuff, like organizing
It
when you
was
can bump in,
huge.
all the stuff that needs
Hmm.
to go in, lighting, stage prep, like it's insane.
People probably
The
don't
amount of
actually
people
grasp.
that are on the
Yeah,
ground doing it.
that's what I was
Yeah,
going to
it's
say.
hundreds of people.
And the teams, there was like there was a lot of teams. I remember. I can't remember the exact number, but I remember.
16, I think.
Yeah, it was like 16, 12 or 16 teams or something like that, and every team had to have like a team manager and a translator because they're all teams from. There was like fucking teams from Sweden and Korea and Japan, or I don't know. I don't think Korea was there, but Japan was definitely there.
Yeah.
Sweden, I'm pretty sure, was there. Like all these regions, and they just like like 2 to 4 support staff per team. You can just imagine the amount of people there were. I actually genuinely don't recall the last time I saw that many people working at an event. Even on the scale of like IEMs and MEOs, I think there was probably more staff at this Overwatch World Cup Sydney stop just because of how many translators and blah blah blah. And there was like fucking it felt like half of Blizzard was there too. There was heaps of Blizzard staff as well. So it
Yeah.
was just crazy.
Yeah. And it was the first time I'd worked in an actual broadcast scenario where um I was taking like direction from other people as well.
Hmm.
Like most of the time I was just sitting there, the game would go live and I would just do my thing. There was no real expectations.
Right.
Whereas working with Jason Alchemista and Imagine, who was the other in-game observer at the time, and another guy, Michael, I can't remember what his handle was, but yeah, they're all there with us in there. And they taught MC and I so much about observing and production and the theory behind observing, what to show and when, what's important, what's not important, knowing that you can't catch every kill,
Hmm.
and it's not important to catch every kill, but it's important that people understand what's happened, why it's happened, what could happen next, and that sort of information, so they can put together the story of match. Um, and so from there, like, yeah, it was just I learnt so much that weekend. And working with MC, obviously, yeah, we formed a bit of a bromance together, worked a lot of contenders together, a lot of events, and we sort of just had this natural flow together where
Hmm.
um, we didn't really even need to talk during a broadcast to observing. We were just kind of there in each other's pocket the entire time.
That's beautiful. That's cute.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
it
a, it's
is.
like
I
it's
love
a, it,
MC.
it's
Shout
like
out to MC, man. He's actually, yeah, I love MC.
It's like a casting duo, but you don't really kind of see it when it's the observers. But I'm sure it's sort of the same vibe where you work with someone so much that you kind of just pick up on their tendencies and know what each other are going to do and how it's all sort of going to work. But would you say at that event you sort of learned a lot of the fundamentals of observing? Like up to that point, I guess you were sort of just doing it, like you were just doing what you thought was right. But
Yeah,
this is where you kind of started to think about it a little bit more.
yeah, yeah. So like Overwatch is you can kind of predict what's going to happen in Overwatch. You know, you see a Genji getting their ultimate, you're like, okay, that's probably something that I'm going to want to show.
Yep.
It's flashy and there's lots of kills and stuff. So I would just, mindlessly click on the Genji and we'd watch that. Whereas after I'd done this event with Overwatch World Cup, I sort of had a more open-minded view of the match. So it's like, Genji's got ultimate, but Zenyatta on the other team
Has
has the
strengths.
healing.
Yeah.
Is it going to be up in time for him to like be able to heal? And so you go to the Zenyatta point of view instead and watch him like get from 90 to 100 just in
Mm,
time.
mm.
The Genji ultimate. So it's just adding little bits and pieces to the narrative of the game that you can show that isn't just, you see an Genji come in, you see it get trans, and you're like, oh, Genji sucks. It's like, well, actually, the Zenyatta's insane and farmed 30% of charge in 10 seconds.
Right. Yeah, true. All right, well, tell me about your travel for this event, because again, you were still living in Newcastle at that time. So,
Yeah.
and I also think it's important here to reiterate the scale of this event was not like you going into the studio, sitting there for I don't know how long you would sit there to do a normal show, but let's say like maybe 8 hours, right? And then going home again. This is like you wake up, you get into the venue at least I remember my call time being 6 a.m. I don't know what it was for you, but it would have been probably
It was
something
like
close to it.
7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you get up, you're probably getting up at what, like 3 a.m., 4 a.m., maybe even earlier than that to get there. You come in, you get there at 7 a.m. You're probably like bumping in some random bullshit for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
Then the show starts at like 10 o'clock, say. You do 8 hours, 10 hours of show, and then there's another like 2 hours of fucking whatever else afterwards, and then you get to go home. At which point you've probably been at the venue for maybe 15, 16 to 18 hours, something like that. And you're just absolutely cooked. So the scale of this event was absolutely nuts. It was like 12-hour days, just so much shit going on all the time. Not to mention, I don't know if you were involved in it, but the bump in for that event was insane as well, because it went for like 2 or 3 days too. So what was your experience
I think
like?
it's because they had
working
this
at the
weird
event?
lift that you could only fit so much in at
Yeah,
a time.
yeah.
And there was so much gear to send up this one like tiny lift. Yeah. That was terrible for me because obviously the days were so long and I had to commute as well,
Mhm.
which was like 6 hours round trip. So I was finishing up at the event, getting on the train, sleeping on the train, getting home, showering, sleeping for maybe like 1 or 2 hours, and then getting up, getting on the train, sleeping, and going in. Um, and that went on for like I think 2 days of rehearsal. And I said to, I think it was Brad at the time. I think he was leading it. I was like, "Hey man, I'm like coming in from Newcastle. Is there like any spare rooms available?" And he's like, "What is wrong with you? Like, you need like tell us sooner, please. Like, you don't need to be doing that. Like, we'll get you a room. It's totally fine." And I was like, "Oh, thank
Yeah,
God I don't have to commute anymore."
yeah.
Um,
That was a
he's
good
like,
move
"Why
on
didn't
your
you tell
behalf.
me sooner?" I was like, I didn't want to like be a pest. It's my first big event.
Yeah,
I didn't want to like be that annoying guy.
yeah,
And really, I should have just asked.
yeah.
Seems like common sense now.
All right. Well, with all that said and done, like in hindsight, was that an event that was kind of like a bit of an awakening moment for you? Because whenever I talk to you or MC or anyone about that event, you're always like, "Oh, this was such a great event, blah blah blah. I love that event so much." Was this kind of like you, not necessarily like seeing the dream or whatever, but kind of being like, "Oh, you know what? This esports thing is kind of legit."
Yeah, for sure. Being in like in my first broadcast environment, it was the first time that I could hear a live crowd when I was observing.
Hmm.
And when you catch a good play, you'd hear the crowd from the arena like cheer, and that's like such a really great feeling. I mean, you'd probably relate when you cast a good moment on CS when you're
Yeah.
in the arena and the crowd goes nuts. Like it's the best feeling. It's like as good as it gets, really, for observing. And so from that point on, I was kind of like really into it. Really, I took every opportunity I could to observe. Um, and that's when Contenders started up. And I was still working like a 9 to 5 through the week, but every opportunity I got, I would go and do like MEOs. I would do PUBG. I would do Fortnite. I would do anything really. I was like taking leave. I was taking my annual leave from work to get like the Thursday, Friday, and the Monday off to go
Hmm.
do esports events, which isn't sustainable at all
No, it's
because
not.
you don't actually get time. It's not real time off. It's taking time off to work.
Before we get to the burnout point, there's a couple of other things that I want to talk about, because
Yep.
I feel like you're doing my job for me, right? You've pretty much written this whole script. Now you're going through all the topics that I want to go through, but you're going a little bit faster than I want to. So I'm gonna pull you back for a second here and talk a little bit about Contenders, because I think this was a very important period of your career. It was quite a formative point, I suppose, for you, right? So you get locked in for this Contenders show, which at the time I think would have been like Tuesday, Wednesdays, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. Sometimes there was like 3-day weeks sometimes, and obviously you're working full time. You're traveling from Newcastle. You're doing all these shows. And even then, on top of that, sometimes you're working on World of Tanks as well. I remember in some cases. So there's a lot of work going on for you. But how did you sort of go through this whole period with Contenders? I know this. I know that it lasts for multiple years, so there's probably a couple of things that muddy the waters a little bit. On sometimes, you were working during the week, and in some cases, I recall later on during Overwatch Contenders, they changed the play days so that you guys would like basically record the whole thing on Saturday, and then we
Yeah.
would like watch it and actually cast it, not live, on like Tuesday or Wednesday or something like that. So I think at the start of Overwatch Contenders, you guys were there observing when we were casting, right? Or was it always like on Saturdays?
I think it was always Saturdays. Like I would always come in all day on the Saturday, and all the matches would be played on the Saturday and recorded.
Which is a lot of
And
games,
then
right?
yeah, it was like 10 hours of observing,
Pretty
and
nice.
yeah, it was fun because you got to observe
Mhm.
and got to hang out with MC, and we would just chill out, put music on, order pizza and whatever, and just vibe out and watch Overwatch. But at the same time, like the days were really long,
Mm.
and when you start getting series like bad team against bad, well, not none of them are bad, right? None of these
Okay,
players
but
are bad.
I know what you mean.
Let's get that straight. None of them are bad, but they're like lower tier teams, and you see them flailing about, and the games aren't entertaining. And then you get 4-0 stomps as well, and you know it's going to be a 4-0 stomp before you even start, but you still got to like stay engaged and try and like capture the best moments, even though your head's not really in it.
Yep.
Um, so that was always tough. And then I think maybe it was Mike Mixter asked if I wanted to do like a World of Tanks broadcast afterwards. I was like, what the fuck is World of Tanks? I never heard of that in my life. And I like MC was doing it as well, so I was like, yeah, why not? I'll give it a go. And it was actually so much fun. I like it was such a nice little change to be able to do a World of Tanks broadcast. It like the games are quite slow. I had no idea what was going on, but it was like watch the tanks roll around and shoot each other eventually, and they all just sort of poke and prod and then just blast each other
You
right
know
at
what's
the end.
funny is like
And it was awesome.
everyone shits on World of Tanks, but like you ask anybody that worked on that WGL show, the World of Tanks show back then, and they were like, "Yeah, that show was the best." Like for some reason, something that show was just I don't know. We had a lot of fun on that show, but obviously 2 shows in one day. That's not only just 10 hours of Overwatch, but that was pretty much almost 10 hours of World of Tanks as well. So you're working these absolute cooker hours. You said you're sort of just doing it for a bit of extra cash and experience, but at a certain point, right, that starts to become maybe not enough. And you think I'm going to go into burnout here, but I'm not quite. We're not quite there yet. I want to talk about a couple of the big events that maybe kept you going because there's this thing in
Yeah.
esports that people don't know. It's like you do all these shit shows, and they're not shit. They're really not. But like once you've done them for 2 years, you're like, I need something more. I need to do something better, or I want to see some progression or something like that. So you eventually get to do things like Melbourne Esports Open and PAX and PUBG Global Invitational, which was our OS qualifier in the ESL
Mm.
studio, and you got all the people and stuff and the arena and such like that. So is that kind of what keeps you going? Because I felt like you actually did keep going for quite a while. You were doing this grind for like I think it was like 2 years, right? Something like that.
Yeah, it would have been contenders for maybe 2 years, and then
Mm.
like some events mixed in as well. Um, like you said, yeah, I was just doing it for extra cash. Like back then, I was still, I like didn't have a day rate.
Mhm.
I was just like on hourly,
Yeah.
and so picking up a few extra hours to do another broadcast, like, hey, why not? I'm already there. Might as well just get involved and do some more stuff. But yeah, always with contenders, you'd play the season, but you'd always have the finals at the end, and
Mhm.
that was like more exciting. And it got to a point where most of the finals were being played in an arena. We had MEO, we had
IEM.
PAX, we had IEM even
Mhm.
with the back to back stages, and you could
Yeah.
hear.
Fuck you,
Yeah, I
Overwatch. Fuck
remember.
you.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have "Fuck You Overwatch" playing like or like being chanted in the IEM stage, and you could hear it on the floor
Yeah.
in the Overwatch stage while the matches are being played. Is yeah, it was scenes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely the events that kept me going. Like I said, when you have a crowd and a crowd reaction, it just gives you that extra like dopamine hit, I guess you could call it.
Mhm.
Catch a good moment, you hear a crowd go crazy, and you're like, yeah, we got that. We got it. We showed them that. Um, because I don't want to like get too deep into like observing or like seem like superior or anything like that.
Oh,
But
we can do that later,
I,
by the way. I actually have a segment for that later on. So for those watching that
I'll,
are
I'll
actually interested in that,
touch on it really quickly
there is a
now, and I'll
timestamp
leave
later
it
too.
to stew.
Yeah.
I'd say that like observers are just important to the game as casters
Sure.
because
100%.
we we put the game in front of the casters to cast.
Yep.
I'll leave that for now.
Yep.
Go on to that.
I 100% agree with you. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that a little bit later on. That maybe is going to be in part two. I think right now we're probably still in part one of the video. That's going to be in part two. So you might have to wait a little bit for that if you're watching this as it releases. But okay, so let's go through your list of accomplishments up to this point, right? You've done obviously a lot of stuff. You've done World Cup, you've done Contenders, and I want to sort of skip through all the way to sort of 2019, and this is kind of where you start to burn out because to give you an idea, this is all of the stuff that you were doing. You were doing all of those regular shows. You had the MEO 2018, MEO 2019. You did Fortnite. You did IEM Sydney's. You've done PAX, and it kind of gets to a point where like you've almost done it all, right? You've kind of found this like portfolio of work within Australian esports, and there's almost like nowhere further to go necessarily. Not to mention, during all this time, you're working full time, you're traveling 6 hours a day to get to work and back and such. And so, I guess at a certain point, anyone is going to start to burn out doing that. It doesn't matter how many good opportunities you get. It doesn't matter how much money you're getting paid. It's kind of unsustainable. So why did you quit? Why did this burnout happen? Or just talk me through the whole decision making process around that. What was actually the motivating factor in basically giving up that life?
I think it was just yeah, like you said, just general burnout of just working so much all the time. I really didn't spend any time on myself.
Hmm.
I was just working esports every weekend, pretty much. There was rarely a time where I wasn't working on the weekend. Um, and the events were good. You know, working MEOs and being in the prod trucks and the Fortnite events, the Australian Open one, where we
Yep.
decked out the ground and um, had the amazing set down there on the ground was insane. All the players playing together on the floor, that was sick. Um, but then during this time while I was doing contenders, after I'd met Jason Alchemister at um, at Overwatch World Cup, we were like talking all the time just about Overwatch, and he was doing Overwatch League as well. And we started sort of talking about the opportunity for me to like go over to do Overwatch League, like
Yep.
go and work on Overwatch League as an observer. Um, and that got really far along, like it was quite close to happening. But then there was like a point in time, I can't remember when it was, but half the Overwatch League team got let go. Like
Mm.
half the broadcast team got let go. And I think um this is like no shade on Jason, but he's not like a yes man. He would like tell you if he thought something was shit,
Yep.
and he would stick to his guns. And I don't think they liked that. He had a certain way he wanted to do things, and they said, "No, you need to do it this way." And he said, "All right, fuck it. Like,
Yep.
not gonna
I'm out.
get your own way." And he actually went on to do E League, which was the CS tournament.
Yep.
That ran for a while, and now he runs his own studio with Scoots.
Mhm.
Do not peak, so he's doing just fine. Um, but yeah, I think missing out on that opportunity, and then which was like devastating because I was like already planning like move to LA. I'm just like
You were
this
all in on the dream,
still
right?
like
In your head, you were all
still
in.
like young. Yeah, in my head I was like it's actually happening. This is crazy. And then that sort of fell through out of nowhere. Like it was like a Twitter that came out and was like, half the broadcast team has been let go. Message Jason. Surely that's like not you. And he's like, yeah, it is. And
Yeah.
at that point, I was like, all right, well, that's it done. I don't want to go work there if I'm not gonna work with these guys that I'm close with now.
Yeah. But
Um,
not only that, but he's
and
like your contact, right? Like if anyone's getting you in, it's him.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, we would talk so much about like observing philosophy, and he was
Mm.
always really impressed with MCs and myself's work on contenders. He would say it would. I feel weird bragging, but he would say like, "Oh, your observing is better than Overwatch League right now." And I was like, "Well, that's pretty cool." Um, but there was a PAX event, and I'm not sure what was being played at PAX. I think it might have been a CS event, perhaps. Um, but there was like another. It was a Logitech booth,
Mm.
and they were doing like casual matches in this Logitech booth area where like players could sit down and play like a 5v5, 6v6 Overwatch. And this 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 box was tiny. It was enough for you to sit in and look at a computer screen. If you put your elbows out, you would hit the
The
wall.
classic Expo experience.
It was a hot box. It was so hot in there. It was sweaty, and I felt like I was just stuck in this box for like 8 hours a day,
Yeah.
observing like shitty Overwatch. Um, and at the end of the third day, I was like, I don't want to do this. Like this
Yeah.
sucks. I was just hating it by the third day, and I remember walking up to Damo, who looked after Contenders. I think he was directing it or producing it, and I just said, "Hey, man, like I'm not going to do Contenders like next season. Like I don't want to do it anymore."
Yep.
And he was like, "All right, no problem. Like thanks for like coming and letting me know."
Yeah. He understood. He knew exactly.
I don't know if he cared. He was like, "It's all right, we'll find another observer. It's fine." But yeah, at that point, I was like, "I'm done.
Yep.
I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. It's like not worth it." And I was like still so defeated from missing out on the Overwatch League opportunity that yeah, just decided that weekend like nah, not for me anymore.
I think we've all kind of had that moment, and some of us have quit. I've had that moment, and I didn't quit, but I was talked back from the edge, so to speak. But there was definitely a period where I was thinking, like, is it even worth it? Like, what? I was sitting there, like, what am I doing with my life? Like, why am I doing this? Is it worth it? And in some cases,
What's
I'd
that
say,
constant chase for what's next?
yeah,
Like you do so many events, which is great, and I know people would kill for the opportunity to do it. But personally, when you've done all these events, you always want to improve and you want to think, what's next? What's going to take me to the next level?
yeah,
And being in Australia, it's so hard. It's so hard to get to the next level because you have to be like, just like being a competitor or a team, you have to stand out like
you have to
so
be a
much to
generational
even get
talent,
noticed.
and even then,
Yeah,
it's
you have
maybe
to
not
be
enough.
a one in a million talent.
Yep.
And when the scene is so small, you find so few people in Australia who can go to the next level. Um, and once that opportunity slipped by, I was like, that was like it.
Yep.
That was the chance, and it's gone. So like, it's not gonna happen for me.
Yeah, which is an interesting thing to say because you are still in esports. Like anyone watching this right now would think you just quit and you're out, and this is the end of the interview. But that's not actually the case. So, how long did you actually quit for? Because it actually kind of looks like, based on the timeline, you weren't really gone for that long. You quit sometime during 2019, and then around 2019, Longshot starts to get talked about. So, how long did it sort of take before you started having these conversations?
So I never quit esports. I think I just quit working in it. So like, I always like kept consuming the content and
Hmm.
following teams and following games and stuff like that. I never stopped enjoying esports as a whole. I just stopped enjoying working it. Um, and so maybe it was like a year and a half, maybe a little longer, that I wasn't doing any esports work at
Right.
all. Maybe there'd be like a one day, I don't know, JBL gig that I would do for a couple of hours of Valorant or something like that when it came out. Um, but it was nothing like I was never locked in. Is
Yep.
is a good way to put it. It was just one offs when I felt like it. Um, and so Apex got released, and at first I didn't really get into it. I like I'd never played a battle royale. Oh, actually, that's a lie. I actually played a shitload of PUBG. Now that I think about it,
Everybody did.
um, but it was so fast paced. It was such a different game. There was like movement. I never played like Quake or anything like that growing up, so I like never
Hmm.
was never used to the movement. The time to kill was really long, and I just couldn't get into it. Um, and I persisted, and I kept like dabbling in it and playing in it, and started to watch like a bit more Apex. Like people were streaming it on Twitch and stuff like that, and tournaments started popping up. So I just kept like sort of looking at it. It was nothing that I ever thought like, "No, that's like the thing I want to do next." Um, but it was towards the end of 2019, and Kale Genome, who I was friends with from Contenders, um, we were just like back then. We were just like friends. Like you know people from broadcasts that
Sure.
you've worked on. Um, and everyone knows everybody in the broadcast in Australia because it's so tiny. He just messaged me and he's like, "Hey, um, thinking about starting something up for Apex. Do you want to get involved? Like, do you want to come do it with me?" And I straight away said yes. Like, I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like fucking cool. Sounds like a good challenge.
Mhm.
It's a new game. I'm kind of interested in it. Like, why not?" Um, and I'll leave it at that. If you want to like ask another question.
I mean, there's a bunch of questions here. The first one I did have was how did that initial conversation go? Which is obviously you've sort of detailed there. Genome reached out to you. You said let's go. The next one that I have is what was sort of the initial startup cost? Not necessarily. I don't want numbers necessarily, but was there like any considerations around that? Because as we know now, as I know now, it's kind of become maybe bigger than what you would normally think it would be at that time, I suppose. So did you think about like buying gear or we have to do this, we have to make graphics, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff? What was that sort of initial buy-in, I suppose?
There was like no real initial buy-in, I guess. There was like a few graphics that we got made and stuff because um it wasn't really until I started Longshot that I was able to like learn how to do like Adobe Suite and stuff like that. It wasn't in
Sure.
my wheelhouse until then, and then I had to learn how to do all that sort of stuff. So we got like a few graphics made, and the shows were like really basic. It was like I was still using OBS, which is fine. Don't get me wrong. I'm not hating on OBS, but there's for doing actual broadcasts, there's better software available.
Hmm.
Um, and we didn't put any money into it to sort of start. Like we weren't getting paid. We were just doing it for funsies and trying to build a brand out of nothing.
Yeah.
Um, and so we just kept pumping away at these online tournaments that they would host every week. Um, and we would just turn up and produce it and try and create a broadcast out of it. Um, I think we had to start with it was just myself and Genome, and at that time I was doing some crazy like observing in game, but like also giving him like a Discord like screen share
Right.
to like for him to cast off as well. And he was in game too, and I was also like directing, changing scenes, and casting at the same time. So I was like observing, directing,
Yeah.
and and casting at the same time. So,
The
and I'm not a
bedroom
good
cast
caster.
classic.
Like I am not a good caster. I Some people have it, some people don't, and I don't. And so eventually we got I think Judge.
Right.
Judge was casting for us for a while. Um, and I think it was maybe it was like probably like a year and a half, or maybe yeah, maybe like a year of us just doing these weeklies for nothing, just like doing them every week on Twitch. And this is like an average of like 50, 60 viewers a stream, and then eventually it started like growing up to like maybe like 100, 200, 300. Suddenly people started tuning in to watch these Apex weeklies. Um, and it was a PGL tournament. It was a PGL Summer Showdown, I think. Um, and we got recommended to it for it by some players because they knew that we were like doing all these weeklies
Mm.
and stuff. They needed someone to do it for APAC South, and we got offered it, and we're like, yeah, sure, we'll give it a go. And no broadcast fee, so we weren't getting paid to do it. But we had to get like graphics made. We had to get an actual director. That's where I first worked with Swifty for the first time,
Yep.
who I'm now very very close with. Um, had casters, had like replays, had like the whole shebang because it was like an actual like PGL branded broadcast, so it needed to be like really good. So we blew like 5 6 grand
Mm.
on like this one broadcast um, when we weren't making money to begin with. So that kind of sucked, but it happens. Um, you
Well,
got to spend it to get it.
what did that broadcast do for you in terms of obviously where you're at now? We know Longshot does a lot of work with ALGS, pretty much runs ALGS in APAC South as far as the broadcast side is concerned. So was this PGL event kind of a contact maker? Like, did you end up talking to people from EA or Respawn or whoever it is that kind of got you in onto ALGS? And how did that sort of end up kind of tying into where you are now? Because I think it wasn't too long really after that point where you actually ended up sort of securing ALGS.
Yeah, so it was. I'm not sure how it worked behind the scenes, because obviously I didn't have any of that information at the time. We just tried to
Mm.
put on the best broadcast we could for PGL. And then it came around that they were going to create this global series where all the regions would play off against each other and meet at the end for a big LAN. COVID ended up putting a stop to that for a while. There was no
Yep.
LAN events for a good period of time. Um, but EA needed someone to do APAC South, and um, I don't know if people know, but EA are quite close with the community as well. They have pretty much open lines of communication with like the players,
Yep.
um, and all the stakeholders that are involved in the ALGS, and they're quite like good at listening. And they have meetings at the start of every split where they talk to all the players about concerns and that sort of thing. So they had one of these about the broadcast for Global Series, and a couple of the players mentioned us, mentioned Longshot,
Mhm.
and and then after that, yeah, EA reached out to us and were like, "Hey, we can see like some of the work you've done. You've been like recommended by the players. Do you want to do ALGS?" And we're like, "Yeah, of course. Like that sounds awesome." Um, didn't know what I was getting myself into at the time because it's like a massive product,
Yep.
and I'm out of a bedroom still. Um, and so yeah, we ended up securing that, and that was like after maybe 2 years of grinding for free. That was like when we first got our first broadcast fee, which meant
Right.
we were actually getting paid for the work we were doing. Um, and it was essentially enough to cover costs.
I was going to say, is
Cover the
it enough
cost
to cover
of
the costs?
Yeah, it was enough to cover the costs. Like I didn't make any money off it.
Hmm.
Neither Kale or myself did. It was enough to like put on a professional looking broadcast and pay talent appropriately. Um, and yeah, I suppose it just sort of evolved from there. Like the game got better, the viewership got better for the game, um, and it just became like a really popular esports title.
So, one thing I want to ask you before we step into the next topic is how much time were you actually putting into Longshot at that point? Because bearing in mind, you're still obviously working full time throughout all of this as well. So, this is kind of like a weekend project, but how many hours, let's say, is it? Because I know I saw how
Mm.
much you were working on it. When we started going into the studio and stuff. But before then, when we were doing Winter Circuit and stuff like that, what was the time investment?
It was a fair bit. Like, I was like working and getting home after work and spending maybe like 4 hours a night
Hmm.
on it.
So the 4 hours a
Obviously
night that
not.
people normally have as free time when they come home from work and they watch TV, have dinner, and go to bed, you're spending that working on Longshot.
Yeah, pretty much. Whether it's like conceptualizing like graphics or stats or um, just things to make the broadcast better. Because
Mhm.
our channel was like there's the Play Apex channel, which is the main Twitch channel um for Apex. And like all the professional stuff like done by PGL and now Esports Engine goes to that channel. It's like where all the Europe and America Pro League gets done,
Yep.
which is like where all like the giga viewership is. Whereas we're on the Longshot channel, because our time zone like coincides with I think APAC North, or it's like really close, and there's overlap between America as well.
Yep.
So we could never do it on the Play Apex channel. We had to do it on Longshot channel, and so because we weren't getting the Play Apex channel, we were able to like create our own sort of brand, like look and feel to the broadcast. Like it was always ALGS, but
Yep.
we could do things like a little differently. Like we had different stat screens, we had the placement timelines, we had like drop locations where people were dropping that sort of thing, the beacon. Um, and so these were like things that we were able to do before the main broadcast like thought to do it, I suppose.
Yep.
Um, and so in a way, it gave us like space to innovate. And then I was using like most of my time, um, either setting up graphics for the week coming up, or just like thinking of new ideas of stuff to do. We have like a massive application that I built for the stats in the back, like runs the back end of the stats.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you've seen it, but
Harvester.
yeah. Oh no, that's the database that hooks into the stats. Yeah, that's a
I
different
think
thing.
I've seen the actual Excel doc. I'm pretty sure you shared it once before, like Harvester was actually a thing, so that we could see the
Yeah,
stats and stuff. But yeah, I've seen it, I think. But I know what it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
right? I've done that. I haven't done that, but I've done similar things for like for World of Tanks. I had something similar, which was kind of low key, but like you pull all the data and it's just like thousands and thousands of what is essentially lines of code, which I was doing in an Excel doc. I don't know if you're doing what you're doing. You're probably coding stuff, but
Yeah, yeah, a lot of it's custom code.
yeah,
That's like
it's just
my
crazy.
it's like my education was computer science.
Hmm.
It made sense to write real code,
Okay,
I
so
guess.
here's one question that I have for you that I've just thought of before we go on is like you've already burned out from playing once, you've burned out from esportsing once, and now you've just decided, yeah, I'm going to do a full-time job plus esports again. Like, is there never anything in your head that goes, maybe I shouldn't do all of this?
I think when it's fun, it's okay. Like
Right.
I was enjoying myself doing it. It was like a challenge and something I hadn't done before, and I was learning so much while I was doing it. Like if people think that broadcasts like that people turn up on the day and just do it, like you're dreaming.
Yep.
There's like so much work behind the scenes, prep, um, rehearsal, like even the casters, they don't just turn up. They like do their research during the week.
Mm.
So they can have things to talk about on well, I mean, good casters do their research and don't
Right.
just turn up on the day. Um, but I was enjoying it. I was like enjoying the grind of improving something, and I was invested at that point. Like I'd spent my own money on it um, to to try and build it, and it was like my baby at that point. I'd spent so much time on it that I was attached to it. Like it was actually my product. Well, I say my, but obviously like Kale is very involved, Genome
Yep.
is very involved, and it's ours as well. But when you spend so much time on something, you don't want to fuck it up essentially. So I was spending so much time trying to make sure it was as good as it could be
Yep.
um, while I was working, and I never like burnt out because it was fun and it was so new. And there was some nights
It
where
was
it
the
wasn't
passion, right?
enjoyable. It was the passion, yeah. There's some nights where it's Friday night and they're doing a scrim cup for money, and I've just had like a shitty Friday or something like that at work. It's like, do I really want to go home and like cast and produce and observe this? Like, no fucking way. I want to like turn off my brain and play
Yeah.
Path of Exile for like 6 hours.
Hmm.
But you still turn up and do the broadcast because I suppose that's a good thing about being in it with Genome as well, is that um, it's not just me. There's like he like relies on me to do things and I rely on him to do things.
Yeah.
So I wasn't able to like let it slip, I guess. So that sort of like kept me in the game as well. Knowing that what you're doing is impacting someone else
Yeah.
too.
Hi there. If you made it this far and you're enjoying the content, please make sure you subscribe. Or if you really want to go the extra mile, you can support me on buymeacoffee.com/elfishguy. There's a link in the bio.